It was scary and a lot of fun. But we really didn't know what we were doing at the beginning. So we had to make it up as we went along. It was like a snowball, and it just got bigger and bigger. We had a wonderful group of people who worked really hard, and then nothing could stop us after that. Even though we didn't win all of the next campaigns, we certainly thought we could.
My late father was one of the original co-sponsors of the non-discrimination bill in the late 1970s. So for me, I was really excited to sort of lead the effort and run the campaign in 2005.
We went out to referendum and a people's veto, and we finally upheld the non-discrimination law after 28 years.
Once you have a non-discrimination law in place, what happens is that people are a little bit freer, of course, to say who they are at work. And it's also clear that they have families that they go home to. And that allows you then, I think, to start having more of a discussion about the family issues, which, of course, does lead you to many things, including marriage.
We just got up the next day and kept organizing to identify more and more and more people who supported the notion of marriage equality.
One of the key moments in this work actually came on Election Day 2008. And this was the year of Obama. And we knew that turnout was going to be extraordinary.
We identified and trained 350 volunteers and talked to voters at the polls about why marriage matters. And part of the strategy was for supporters to sign a postcard.
The afternoon rush came, and we got more and more of these phone calls. And all over the state, they were running out of postcards. And by the end of the night, we had not only surpassed our goal of 10,000, we had collected 33,000 postcards from pro-LGBT voters. This was our moment, and we decided to officially launch our campaign heading into 2009, and we had the wind at our backs.
I was approached by 3 women, and they asked if I would be interested in signing on to or co-sponsoring a bill. I read it that night, and it just struck a chord.
I'll be honest, I really didn't think that the legislative bill was going to pass the Maine State Senate at that time.
A lot of it was just starting out with who do we know is absolutely in our camp, and then kind of after we did that work, it was like, okay, who are the moderate Republicans? And then if the opening presented itself, I would jump in and say, well, I don't know if you knew that, but I'm a lesbian and I've been with my partner for X many years, and we really want to be able to get married in our home state. We don't want to have to go somewhere else to have our wedding. We want to have it right here. It's important to us and it's important to our families.
One of the moments that really stands out to me was the public hearing on April 22nd, 2009.
We had done all this work over the years to build our capacity, to build that sense of community, to get people empowered. We had asked all of our supporters to wear red, and our hope was just that we would outnumber our opposition 2-1.
I walked into the Civic Center and looked up, and it was just a sea of red. And for most of us, it was the first time that we were the visible majority.
And I stepped to the microphone. I announced that I was introducing to them a bill. There was thunderous applause, and thousands of people, I think, stood up.
We essentially had all these people coming in to educate the legislature and say, here are all the people who are behind this, so that in the end it becomes this enormous truth-telling exercise.
We were speaking about our lives, about the challenges that we faced as LGBT people. Couples were getting up there who had been together for 40 years and talking about what it would mean to them to be able to marry each other.
It was really the moment that our community went from thinking that we couldn't do this to really believing that it wasn't a matter of if we were going to win marriage, but when.
The affirmative.
When it came time for the final vote, and it did pass, and there were some very courageous members from across the aisle, it was very touching. As I was passing the papers to the governor, I recalled that the governor often talked about what his father used to ask him, John, what have you done for the people of Maine today? And so remembering that story, I said, when your dad, who has passed on, would ask you what you have done today, you'll be able to tell him now that you've made life much better for the people of Maine.
It was an experience that people had never really felt before. We as gay people never thought that marriage was a possibility for us. It was an institution that existed for other people, but not for us. So when you grow up in that and you understand that you will never have that, then you learn to live without it. You learn to justify your life in a way that, you don't need it. But then it is something that actually can happen, that we could actually win this. It really changes how you view yourself. It changes how you view your community. It changes how you view the world. We knew because of our experience in 2005 that once we passed it, our opponents would gather signatures and would put it out to referendum.
We really didn't have, a bank account or, a website until the 1st of June. So it was a very compressed campaign.
We ran a high-functioning campaign. We pulled out all the stops. Going into the last 5 days of the election, we were ahead by 8 points. We had 48%, they had 40%, there were 12% undecided.
I clearly thought that we had put a campaign together in a very short amount of time that put us in the best position to win on election night. We had raised more money than we thought we were going to be able to. We had hired a bigger field staff than we ever thought we were going to be able to. We, thought we had the right messaging. Sort of everything felt good going in up until that sort of night, and then it all came crashing home after 8 o'clock when the results came in.
I had been downstairs with 1,000 people in the room and watching the numbers come in and feeling relatively optimistic. And I remember walking into the boiler room and Pat Peer turned to me and she said, "We are in a hole that we just can't climb out of." I was really surprised.
One of the saddest moments in my life was when Jesse and I came together and realized that we had lost the 2009 campaign, and just holding each other and crying at that moment.
To come down onto the stage with 1,000 people there and have to tell them that we were not able to uphold the law. It was very, very difficult.
We won't stop counting tonight or tomorrow morning or as long as it takes.
But I remember at one point after it had become clear, my attention turned to one of the TV screens that was up in the ballroom. And the news was broadcasting essentially what was the victory speech for our opposition. And there literally was no one in the audience. And I was surrounded still by hundreds and hundreds of people. And in that moment, I felt so proud because I knew we had built something to last.
You can't overestimate how important it was that the core group of people that ran these campaigns never split apart. It was a bitter defeat in 2009. That hurt. But the day after we lost, we started talking about when are we going to go again.
Had our election in 2009 actually been held in 2008, the numbers suggest that the vote would have been much closer to 50-50. And that's due a lot to a presidential turnout. And that's when we began looking at a citizens' initiative, gather signatures ourselves, and put marriage on the ballot in the election of our choice.
A popular yes vote on the ballot would make Maine the first state in the country where the people brought marriage forward and passed marriage.
Our volunteer teams were small but mighty. And so when we looked at signature gathering, we thought that we could do it ourselves, but it was definitely going to be a big leap. We started in August of 2011, and the effort just totally snowballed. We collected, in the end, 105,000 signatures and turned in more than 87,000 to the Secretary of State. And I'll never forget a team of like 12 of us walking every single one of those boxes with the names of those towns written on the outside of every box so that you could see that they were truly from all over the state. My favorite box said Gilead and Frenchville on it.
Just based on what we were seeing in the really early stages of our outreach, carrying on from 2009, but into 2010 and 2011, we saw that momentum was changing, that we were actually changing hearts and minds fast enough that 2012 seemed reasonable, that we were going to be able to get there. And quite honestly, I don't think anybody really wanted to wait.
So there was a large group in the room of coalition partners, and it was up to us to decide, would we go or not?
It looked like a pretty barren period after 2012, and we weren't willing to let gay people in Maine wait that long. And besides, I told Betsy that we had to hurry up because I didn't want to be dead before this happened.
And it was unanimous. There was a moment of anxiety. What are we doing? And then we hit go.
We knew in 2012 people were gonna vote. We would still have to push some people out, but people were going to vote. And they had just voted against us 3 years earlier. The job was about saying, how do I find the people whose mind I could change, and how do we change minds? We started from a place of saying, let's not assume we know everything about Maine voters and what they're thinking. And let's track what voters are saying. Let's ask experts to help us look at our data.
Every canvasser on my team talked to hundreds, if not thousands, of voters. People don't normally talk about these things in our culture, and so it feels pretty good to break down those barriers. And it's incredible when they do change their minds.
In the end, it was the largest one-on-one tracked persuasion program of any state marriage campaign. It was 250,000 one-on-one conversations.
By August of 2012, it was a beautiful thing to see. I just kind of could look around and go, man, they know what they're doing. And I'm just gonna sit back and admire their work for a little bit, and then I'm gonna sneak out the back before somebody asks me to volunteer, So it was like...
I think the greatest thing about this campaign was that it was brought by the 105,000 people who signed the petition to put marriage on the ballot. The fact that they had some ownership, made the enthusiasm that we saw just so much greater than anything I've ever seen before. While there was all this great, grassroots organizing and sort of field outreach that was taking place, we were able to actually put in place some incredibly sophisticated analytics to measure how we were tracking support, how we were moving support. And all of a sudden we were running on all cylinders. We had the operation, we had the mail program, we had the field program, we had the door-to-door outreach, we had the volunteer support, the massive faith initiatives, the business outreach, the labor outreach, and the advertising and the media side of it as well. It all of a sudden felt like we're really going to be able to take this all the way to November.
We had run the campaign that we wanted, but that didn't give us a ton of confidence. Poll numbers were getting closer. There was a news story we knew was going to come out that day that was a little bit negative.
I knew that the work we had been doing for a couple of years by that point was working. We saw it in the polling, but you're never confident going into an election, especially when we've never won before.
It felt like we were just running as fast as we could up to the edge of a cliff. There were only two possible outcomes. One of them was amazing, and one of them was awful.
I worked as hard as I could, because if I could stay busy and I could keep knocking on doors and I could keep making phone calls and I could keep doing data entry, I just wouldn't think about it as much, about just the disappointment of what happened the time before.
I confess I was optimistic but terrified because we had believed we were going to win in 2009.
I'd say by November, a few days before the election, you start to see, as a campaign manager, you start to see, your whole life flash before your eyes. You're going on 2 hours of sleep per night. The staff has been working like crazy around the clock. In the back of your mind, you really do have to kind of think like, wow, how devastating would that be if we hadn't won? And, I remember I was doing, TV interviews downstairs and then running back upstairs to the war room. There was a lag in how things were being reported. So, but all of a sudden, it just got to this point where we were just winning in these places that, we never thought we could.
As we got to the point where the numbers had pretty much stabled out around 53%, it was an amazing feeling to think, oh my goodness, we have won this. We've won this. There was one moment where Matt came into the room and said, can anybody give me any reason why we should not call this right now?
We got the group together. Everybody sort of had a moment to just let it sink in for just a split second, and then we were running down the hall.
I was in that mass of people jumping up and down and screaming and crying.
I have never seen a room full of so many happy people.
That moment, going up to the podium and looking out and just seeing all those faces and making that announcement, and to be able to say that we finally won the freedom to marry for all loving, committed couples in Maine was just one of the most incredible experiences of my life.
I gave and did everything I could have done or given to this campaign and was completely exhausted, as I should have been.
It really was the culmination of many, many years of work.
Just relief, just overwhelming relief.
What could possibly be better than the feeling in that room at the Holiday Inn when everybody there knew that all our work and everything we had done had paid off?
I was obviously thrilled for our state. I was thrilled for people like, Pat and Betsy and others that had worked for so long on this issue. And I also was really proud that, my wife was a part of some of the first marriages that took place at Portland City Hall a couple months later.
I mean, on the night that, marriages first became legal in Portland, I drove up. I didn't even tell anybody I was coming. I just wanted to sort of see those first couples, walk out. And I just sort of stood across the street out of the way and let everybody have their day. And to know that, so many people played a part in that and the work that went into it and the passion and the energy, you just knew that it was all worth it.
I know this is selfish, but I have to say it, personally for me, this is the first time I've lived in a state where I'm actually married, and I'm really happy about that. I really am. It makes me feel more secure.
Winning marriage equality was incredible, but it's not the end of the journey.
We are at a pivotal moment right now.
It's now within our grasp, that we could actually not just have marriage in a handful of states and a growing list, but to maybe even in the near future, in our lifetime, to be able to really see, same-sex marriage legalized across the country and for all those families and all those couples.
When I think about the future, I think about this. I think about humanity. And what you want out of humanity and your fellow citizens is them to be everything they can be. And that means everybody having the freedom and opportunity to be what they can be, and discrimination and segregation of various sorts limits people and constricts them and really distorts them. And so what my goal is that everyone have the same freedoms and opportunities under law, no matter what their sexual orientation, no matter what their gender identity, because that is good for the individuals and it is good for our community and for our nation.